She was late, again. Clara walked in without excuses. The manager scowled and tapped his watch. 14 minutes late, he snapped. Someone muttered near the counter. What does she think this is? A spy movie? She didn't respond, just tied her apron and moved on. No one saw the man across the street filming her through dark sunglasses. She was fired that afternoon. No one said goodbye. She walked out in silence, gripping a worn coat and a plastic bag. Then, brakes screeched. A black SUV blocked the exit. A man stepped out, calm, unreadable. He looked her dead in the eye. Then he said just 6 words. Is Widow 3 ready for reactivation? Everyone froze, and no one ever called her just a waitress again. Her name was Clara Devins. To the world, she was 48 years old, graying at the temples, slightly hunched from years of double shifts, and dressed in the same faded green uniform every day. She moved with quiet efficiency across the tile floor of Creston Diner, a place too busy to notice her and too loud to hear her. People didn't ask questions about Clara. She brought the coffee, refilled the ketchup, and disappeared like a shadow. But when her shift ended, the second life began. She didn't drive, never owned a phone. And yet, every morning at exactly 5:13 a.m., she was already outside the building across from Lot 27, leaning on a rusted railing with a cracked coffee cup, always watching the same man. He came in at 6:05, alone, sat at booth 4, ordered nothing, said even less. Just another ghost. But Clara saw more than shadows. She saw patterns, the subtle flick of a wrist, the faint bulge of a side holster under a cheap jacket, the way he glanced once every 11 seconds to the corner exit. She logged everything, not in a notebook, in her mind, because Clara Devins wasn't just a waitress. Her apartment sat above a closed dry cleaner on Madison and 3rd, 3 stories of peeling wallpaper, a leaky faucet, and a window view of a crumbling billboard that used to sell happiness. Inside, her living room was barren, save for a folded cot, a single chair, and a lamp with no bulb. But her closet was a different world. Behind a false panel, hidden beneath frayed coats and discount shoes, was a shelf lined with items no waitress should own. A military-issue field radio with shortwave capacity, a topographical map of a region near the Baltic states, weathered and annotated by hand, and a black folder marked with a faded emblem, a phoenix rising from barbed wire, the insignia of Reclamation Unit, R9. She was once its deputy commander. Before R9, Clara was just another analyst. But she wasn't born to sit behind a desk. She had the rarest skill of all. She could vanish in plain sight, the kind of operative who could blend into a protest, a parade, a cafeteria, even a diner. That's why R9 trusted her to do what satellites couldn't. Reclamation Unit was never about capturing enemies. It was about retrieving ghosts, the ones who defected, who betrayed, who slipped through the cracks and built new lives under new names. R9 hunted them. Clara read their lies like footprints in sand, until the mission in Prague, the one that wiped her entire team. She survived, barely, but no report was filed, no medals awarded, no funeral, because the mission itself had been erased from every system, and Clara was erased with it. For the past 7 years, she remained in the shadows. No contact, no briefing, just one instruction buried in her subconscious. If he resurfaces, you follow. You don't engage. You don't reveal. Just watch until the call comes. The man from booth 4, he was one of them, a defector, a strategist, a former ally who turned. And every morning, as he sipped from a chipped mug and stared out the diner window, Clara sat at the counter just 3 feet away, invisible to everyone, except him. They never acknowledged each other, but in their silence a war played out, a chess game in the dust. She knew he noticed her. He knew she was waiting, but neither dared make the first move. Because if Clara Devins was in play again, then something bigger had already started. And this time, she wouldn't be the one to disappear. The thing about Clara Devins was, she didn't complain. Not when the soda machine leaked and she had to mop it 3 times in a row. Not when her name was left off the schedule and she showed up anyway. And certainly not when the younger servers dressed in crisp uniforms and perfect lipstick, leaned behind the counter and whispered loud enough for her to hear. "She moves like she's underwater. I swear she smells like mothballs and coffee grounds. Why is she even still working here? Doesn't she have a cat and a pension to live off of?" They didn't even try to hide it anymore. To them, she was just Clara the ghost, a background blur in their fast-paced world of TikToks and tips. Someone who didn't fit the vibe. Someone who didn't want to. But Clara kept her head down, wrote the orders in quiet cursive, and moved through the chaos like she'd been there longer than the walls themselves. Then came the confrontation. It happened on a Thursday, slow enough that everyone could hear. Clara walked in 12 minutes late, not rushing, not apologizing, just moving with that deliberate rhythm of hers. The manager, Austin, was waiting. Fresh out of business school, Austin was all spreadsheets, wireless earbuds, and pep talks about customer synergy, and he hated unpredictability. He crossed his arms and met her at the kitchen door. "Clara," he said, tapping his smartwatch like a hammer on glass. "Again?" She didn't answer. "Just tied her apron." "That's the third time this week," he snapped. "You don't check in. You don't talk to the team. You don't even try to be part of this place." Still nothing. So he raised his voice, just loud enough for the others to hear. "Look, this is a diner, Clara, not some remote army checkpoint. If you want to act like you're on patrol, maybe you should clock in with Homeland Security." A few of the newer hires laughed nervously. One rolled her eyes and mouthed, "Drama queen." Clara didn't flinch. She tied the final knot of her apron, grabbed a coffee pot, and turned toward the tables. But Austin wasn't finished. "You're not untouchable. Just because you've been here forever doesn't mean you're above standards." Clara stopped. "I'm not above anything," she said calmly. "I just don't have time for noise." It was the first time anyone had heard her speak more than a yes or no all week. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sharp. And for the first time, the staff didn't look amused. They looked uneasy, because there was something in her voice, not anger, not fear, but a tone you didn't use unless you'd spoken those words before, to someone who didn't walk away. Back on the floor, Clara moved like clockwork, clearing plates, refilling mugs, dodging glances. But the camera lingered. Her eyes scanned the booths. Always. She paused by the counter where booth 4 came into view. Empty. He wasn't there today. Her hands tensed slightly around the tray. From the kitchen, someone muttered, "Probably tripped over her combat boots." The others chuckled, but it didn't land the same way anymore. Because by now, the audience is beginning to feel it, the cracks in the surface. She isn't just quiet, she's watching. She isn't just late, she's tracking. And that tray she carries like it weighs nothing, it's balanced like a weapon. Later that evening, Clara clocked out without a word. Her name was already written in red on Austin's clipboard. A decision had been made. She doesn't belong here. She's a liability. She makes the younger staff uncomfortable. But what made them uncomfortable wasn't her silence. It was the feeling that she knew something they didn't. That maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the first time Clara Devins had been underestimated, and it wouldn't be the last. As the door shut behind her, the bell chimed like a soft warning. A final mark before the storm. She disappeared into the alley, her figure swallowed by steam and streetlight. But across the street, still there, still watching, was the man in sunglasses. He clicked something on his phone. A message sent. And somewhere, far from the clatter of plates and shallow jokes, a signal was received. Widow 3 unstable. Activation may be required. Booth 4 was empty for 3 days. Clara noticed the absence the moment she stepped in. The coffee cup at that table hadn't moved. No crumbs, no napkin tucked under a forearm. Just an echo. It wasn't like him. The man who always watched the door, who never ordered but never missed a day. He was gone. She felt it in her spine. Something had shifted. On the 4th morning, Clara didn't come to work on time. She didn't even come to the diner first. Instead, she stood in a worn field jacket on the roof of a parking structure overlooking Pier 17. Binoculars, notepad, calm breathing. She didn't blink for 43 minutes. The man had resurfaced, but not at the diner. He was boarding a cargo vessel. Different name, different clothes, same stance. It was him. She tailed him until the vanishing point. By the time she checked the clock on the rusted pier office wall, she was already 50 minutes late. When Clara finally arrived at Creston Diner, the mood had shifted. Again. Austin, the manager, stood at the front with arms crossed and a smug expression, trying too hard to be serious. He waited until she entered the floor, full house, lunch crowd humming, then cleared his throat. "Clara Devins," he called, loud enough to turn heads. "We need to talk. Now." She didn't blink. She walked up, calm, apron already folded under her arm. "You're late. Again," he said, waving a printed schedule. "This is a business, not some guerrilla outpost you wander into when you feel like it." Behind him, a few staffers peeked out from the kitchen. Customers began to look up from their meals. He knew the audience was watching, and he liked it. You don't communicate. You don't respect the team. You don't care about the standards we work hard to uphold. He dropped the final blow like it was rehearsed. "You're dismissed, effective immediately." The dining room went quiet. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Conversations froze mid-sentence. And Clara just stood there. No anger, no confusion. She slowly looked at him, nodded once, and then, to everyone's surprise, she smiled. A soft, understanding smile. Like someone who had heard this before. Like someone who'd just been told the one thing she needed to hear. Austin looked thrown off for a moment, just a flicker. But it was there. Clara turned, placed her apron on the counter, and walked toward the staff room in silence. A few seconds later, Ricky, a 22-year-old server who always rolled his sleeves too high, muttered just loud enough, "Well, that's that." "About time." Someone chuckled, but others didn't. There was something off about her exit. It didn't feel like someone being fired. It felt like someone finishing a mission. In the break room, Clara opened her locker for the last time. No photo, no personal belongings, just a folded envelope and a pair of walking shoes. She changed in silence. When she emerged, she didn't look back. Didn't slam the door. Didn't say goodbye. Just walked past the register, past the coffee machine, past booth 4, still empty, and pushed the door open as the bell gave one last tired chime. Outside, the city carried on, but Clara didn't blend in like usual. Not this time, because from this point forward, she wasn't waiting anymore. She was moving. And inside the diner, while Austin lectured a new trainee and Ricky sipped a soda like he'd won a bet, a strange tension lingered. One of the line cooks said quietly, "Did you see her face? Like she knew something." The hostess nodded. She didn't look fired. She looked free. Across the street, the man with the sunglasses wasn't filming anymore. He was on the phone. "She's out," he said into the mic. "Repeat, Widow 3 has been released." Clara didn't slam the door. She simply walked out. No scene, no shouting. Just the soft chime of the diner bell as it closed behind her, barely louder than the coffee machine humming inside. In one hand, she held a plastic bag, the handles stretched and worn thin. In the other, a faded green coat, the same one she wore every winter, patched at the elbow with military precision. Her apron was gone. So was her name tag. Her back was straight, but her steps were measured, like someone not walking away, but towards something. No one in the diner moved, not yet. They just watched her fade into the parking lot, as if unsure whether to laugh or salute. Austin stood behind the counter, smug satisfaction softening his jawline. He set down his cup of coffee and muttered under his breath, "About time." But inside that satisfaction, something was wrong. It felt too quiet, too final, like the last line of a song he didn't know he was in. He grabbed his coat and stepped outside. The sky was dimming. Low, slate-colored clouds crawled in from the west. A light breeze swept across the lot, carrying the scent of exhaust and distant rain. Clara had reached the far edge of the lot, near the sidewalk. She paused only once, not to look back, but to adjust her grip on the coat folded over her arm. Austin pulled his keys from his pocket, stepped down off the curb, and turned toward his car. That's when he heard it. Screech! The unmistakable bark of tires gripping asphalt. Not the panicked kind, but a controlled, practiced stop. Deliberate, Surgical. He turned and froze. A black SUV, large, boxy, armor-plated, had pulled in from the far side, sweeping across the pavement with eerie precision. It cut diagonally across the parking lot and came to a halt directly in front of the diner's only exit. No license plate, windows tinted beyond legal limits, wheels still warm from motion. It didn't look like it belonged to anyone in the diner. It didn't look like it belonged anywhere. It looked like command. Austin instinctively raised a hand to shield his eyes from the reflection off the windshield. Behind him, the door to the diner opened again. Ricky stepped outside, then the hostess, then two customers who had already paid but suddenly didn't want to leave. All eyes locked on the vehicle. Then the driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He wasn't tall, but something about him stood taller than anyone else in that lot. Black tailored suit, no tie, clean-shaven, close-cropped hair, more salt than pepper. His sunglasses were opaque, polished, and somehow made him look like he wasn't just observing, but recording. He didn't slam the door. He closed it with care, and then he walked toward Clara. She hadn't moved, still holding the coat and bag, still watching, and when the man stopped 10 feet in front of her, he spoke 6 words. Only 6. Clear, cold, commanding. "Is Widow 3 ready for reactivation?" The words hit the parking lot like a depth charge. Ricky whispered, "What did he just say?" The hostess stepped backward. Inside the diner, people pressed to the windows. Customers who didn't know her name were now staring at her like she'd just pulled off a mask. Clara didn't answer. She simply nodded. Austin blinked. "What the hell is this?" he said aloud, trying to reassert his voice. He pulled out his phone and began dialing. "I'm calling the cops." As if on cue, they were already arriving. 2 squad cars glided into the lot from the side street. No sirens, just the hum of low-speed approach. They pulled in smoothly and stopped a few feet away from the SUV. 2 officers stepped out, hands on belts, cautious, alert. The man in the black suit didn't even turn to look. Instead, he slowly reached into his inner coat pocket and removed a badge wallet. Black leather, smooth, unmarked on the outside. He opened it, didn't flash it, didn't wave it. He just let them see. Both officers looked. One stiffened. The other exhaled. Without a word, they lowered their hands. One of them gave a slow nod. "Understood. Proceed." They turned, walked back to their cars, didn't say another word. Austin stepped back. "Wait, what? What was that? Who is she?" No one answered him, because at that moment Clara turned toward the SUV. The man held the door open for her. She stepped inside without fanfare. No salutes, no ceremony, just certainty. The door closed behind her with a soft thud. The SUV started its engine again, a deep, nearly silent purr, and then it pulled away, gone, just like that. No dust, no smoke, just silence. Inside the diner, it was still quiet. Someone finally said, "She didn't even say goodbye." Another voice, softer. "Widow 3. What is that? Like a code name?" Ricky swallowed hard. "She was watching someone for years. Booth 4. The hostess nodded. "That guy. The one who never ordered. Oh." And then the line cook whispered what everyone else was thinking. "She wasn't one of us." A long pause. "She was there for something else." Austin sat down on the curb, the phone still in his hand, screen dark. His mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. He looked at the parking lot. The spot where the SUV had been was already empty, and in that quiet, a new truth settled like ash. Clara Devins was never late. She was exactly where she needed to be. Start recording classified archive, R9 CMD log 117A. Voice Collar Everett Lane, Ret Reformer Commanding Officer, Reclamation Unit, R9 clearance level, Obsidian, eyes only. Timestamp, Zo400 Zulu. If you're listening to this, then the protocol's been triggered, which means the one thing I hoped we'd never need again is back on the table. You want to know who she is? Fine. Let's talk about her, but not by name. Names are for medals and tombstones. Out here, she's only ever been one thing. Widow 3. Clara Devins was recruited into R9 not because she was loud or flashy. Hell, she barely spoke during her final review. But she had the one thing we couldn't train: patience that could outlast paranoia. You drop her into a hostile city with nothing but a pen, a cup of black coffee, and a name. She'd walk out with a confession and the man's entire alias history. She didn't chase. She watched, and she waited, and then struck once. Clean, silent, final. 8 years ago, we sent her into Operation Redwood, a black-level tracking assignment in Eastern Europe. The target was a former asset turned ghost, one of our own gone rogue. We gave her two partners, one handler, a shortwave radio, and a 14-day mission brief. By day 6, all contact was lost. Satellites showed the extraction point in flames. IDs of the team were burned, DNA mismatched. Everything pointed to total failure. The agency stamped it compromised and wiped the mission. It never happened. Everyone assumed they were all dead. But she wasn't. 3 years later, a field signal pinged outside Vienna. Untraceable, except for one embedded code we recognized, her personal marker. Then silence again, 5 more years. Until now. This week, surveillance teams at Port Langley flagged movement tied to a deep sleeper operative, our original rogue from Operation Redwood. Same behavioral pattern, same visual markers, same strategic vantage points. The problem? No one on our active list could track him. We tried for 3 days. He slipped us like we didn't exist. So I asked one question. What if she's still out there? Turns out, she never left. She didn't come home. She didn't make contact. She went to ground on purpose. She embedded herself inside the target's new life, knew where he went, what he drank, who he avoided. She got a job at a diner 2 blocks from his apartment, watched him eat nothing every morning at the same booth. And for 8 years, she just waited. Not a trace, not a slip, not even a whisper. She lived in a tiny apartment over a dry cleaner. She wore the same uniform every day. People forgot her name. Even her manager thought she was slow, disposable. But Clara Devins doesn't forget, and she's never disposable. That activation phrase, "Is Widow 3 ready for reactivation?" That wasn't for us. It wasn't a check-in. It was permission. You don't call Widow 3. You don't brief her. You unleash her. I've led dozens of operations, buried more agents than I care to count. But no one ever haunted me like her. Because when the rest of us were calculating risks and rotating shifts, she was already there. Already embedded. Already 5 moves ahead. They thought she was dead. No, she was watching. She gave up a name, a life, recognition, everything. For what? For the chance that one day we'd call. And we did. Widow 3 was the last remaining link to a war we weren't allowed to admit we fought. She outlived the file, outlived the mission, and outlived every damn lie we printed to bury her. Don't waste time wondering if she's capable. She's not capable. She's inevitable. You wanted to know who Clara Devins was? She was the one we forgot until the moment we needed someone we couldn't replace. End recording. Clara Devins never came back, not to collect a last paycheck, not to say goodbye, not to explain. The door of the diner opened and closed dozens of times each day after she left, but never once for her. Her name on the schedule was crossed out, her locker emptied, her apron folded and placed in the donation bin without a word. For a while, it was just awkward silence when someone mentioned her. The newer servers tiptoed around the topic. Ricky, the loud one, no longer made jokes about ghost missions or combat boots. Even Austin, the manager, had a certain tightness in his face he couldn't quite mask. Then came the headline, "High-value operative apprehended at border, identity sealed under classified directive." The footage was grainy, shot from a distance. A convoy of military vehicles rolled slowly through a checkpoint in New Mexico. A hooded figure, unidentifiable, was escorted out of the back seat of a black transport truck. Dozens of agents stood surrounding him, motionless. There was no name, no details. Just one sentence buried in the middle of the article that stood out like blood on glass. Tracking made possible through legacy intelligence operations tied to the now-defunct reclamation unit. Austin read it 3 times, then once more, out loud. 3 days later, a plain envelope arrived at the diner. No return address, no postage. Just the words, "For management only." He opened it behind the counter. Inside was a photograph, slightly grainy, printed on matte paper. It was a picture of the Creston Diner staff, taken sometime last year. A staff meal, maybe. Ricky had his arm around the cook. The hostess was mid-laugh. Austin himself had his mouth full of something fried. And at the far edge of the photo, barely in frame, was Clara, smiling, just slightly, like she knew the joke before it was told. On the back of the photo, written in neat, deliberate handwriting, was a single line. "Thank you for letting me leave at the right moment." See, Austin didn't show the others at first. He kept the photo in his drawer for a few days, pulling it out when no one was looking. Eventually, he taped it on the staff corkboard. No explanation, no announcement, just a photo and the silence it brought. The others noticed. No one commented. But they looked at her differently now, even in absence. They remembered the way she always stood with her back to the wall. The way her eyes scanned the room, but never lingered. The way she always knew when someone was about to drop a plate or when the door would open before the bell rang. She hadn't just been quiet. She had been watching. She hadn't just been late. She had been tracking. Customers still ask sometimes, "Whatever happened to that woman, the one with the tired eyes?" No one had a clean answer. Ricky eventually just shrugged and said, "She clocked out. For good." But that wasn't quite true. Because even now, long after the black SUV disappeared and the headlines faded, whenever the door creaked open unexpectedly or a stranger sat too quietly in booth 4, they still glanced toward the kitchen, out of instinct, as if she might still be there, tucked just beyond the steam, watching one last target fade. And somewhere out there, a woman with a quiet smile and a steel spine walked past people who never looked twice, and waited for whatever came next. In the end, Clara Devins didn't need applause. She didn't ask for medals, headlines, or even a proper goodbye. She simply walked away on her terms. And in doing so, she left behind something far greater than recognition. She left a lesson, a reminder, that in a world obsessed with speed, status, and spectacle, quiet strength still matters. That not all heroes wear uniforms or make speeches. Some pour coffee, mop the floor, and keep their eyes open when the rest of us stop paying attention. Maybe you've known a Clara in your life, an older woman at work that people ignore, the silent man who sits at the back of the bus every morning, that neighbor who keeps to themselves but always seems to know when something's wrong. We forget these people. We pass them by. But maybe, just maybe, they're holding the line in ways we can't see. In a time when society moves faster than ever, when value is often measured in followers or flair, Clara's story whispers something we've forgotten. Patience is power. Stillness is strategy. And dignity, even when dismissed, is a kind of resistance. Now, we're not saying everyone has a secret identity or a code name, but perhaps the bigger question isn't who was Clara. Perhaps the better question is, how many Claras have we already overlooked? Let that sit with you. And here's where we turn it to you, the listener. Have you ever worked with someone like Clara? Have you ever judged someone too quickly, only to later realize how much they carried in silence? Or maybe, have you ever been Clara? We'd love to hear your story in the comments. Whether you're a veteran, a lifelong worker, or someone who's ever been underestimated, your voice matters here. Let's make this more than just a video. Let's make it a space where people like Clara aren't forgotten again. And if this story meant something to you, if it made you think, feel, or even pause for a moment, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this video. It helps us tell more stories like this. Stories that deserve to be heard, especially in a world that moves too fast to listen. Thank you for spending time with us. And remember, some people leave quietly, but their silence echoes louder than applause ever could.